Thank you for joining me for another episode of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. Today, I'd like to tell you a story that is very close to my heart, very sacred to me. I hope you'll be able to take it in the spirit that it's intended. There was a man that moved into our old neighborhood. He had grown up in that neighborhood. He was looking for some help. He was kind of down on his luck. He'd had some tough things happen in his life, but he had also had opportunities that most people would never had. He turned his back on those opportunities. His father had been the bishop of ward out on the Indian reservation, was beloved by that people, but he was often gone providing service to those people. And this man took advantage of that time to basically get in trouble. So when he got out of high school, he got drafted into the Vietnam War instead of being able to go to college. I don't know if he wanted to go to college or not, but I'm guessing he probably did. Who wants to go to Vietnam? I mean, not now, but back then during the war. He went through his basic training and he got over there. He fell in with some really bad guys. And within a very short period of time, they had convinced him to join them in robbing a payroll. He called it a train. I don't know if it was a train or just a bunch of trucks. But they robbed this, took the money. He basically was the fall guy. He got caught, was prosecuted under the military standard of justice, and was sent to Fort Leavenworth for years. He got out, tried to rebuild his life, and was living in California. He had the misfortune of being in that earthquake in California where they had the double-decker bridges, and his car was on the lower level, and it took them, I think, 9 days to find him. It crushed his back. He spent a couple of years in the hospital. While they were able to heal him, he was addicted to the opioids for painkillers that they used at the time. When he came to us, while he had a prescription for painkillers, he didn't want to use them because it was metered. They would put a patch on him and it would slowly but surely feed into his system over a day, and then he'd put another patch on. And he didn't like that. He liked to give himself the medication. He liked getting high is what it was. Now, he lived with a couple of our neighbors. I was asked to visit with him on behalf of our church. Every time he'd overdose, he'd be taken to the hospital, and they would call me because my name was in his wallet. And I would go be with him, and he would tell me to go get the drugs in his room and destroy them because he was afraid the police were going to go to his house. He was just renting a room from local people. They would use those drugs to send him back to prison. So I did that. In fact, we had a police officer down the street. He told me, Randy, you should not be driving these down there. What happened if you got pulled over or got in an accident? You would be the one to go to prison. So you need to call and make arrangements to drop these illicit drugs off. So I did that. And, the police were always interested where I got them because this happened routinely. He always seemed to have enough money to buy more than he needed. That's what I was disposing of. And then he'd come back and want his drugs back. And I'd say, no, I got rid of them like you told me to. And anyway, he looked kind of like a slob. I feel bad for kind of judging him. Offered to take him to go get a haircut one time, and he wasn't interested in that. But then a lady down at the end of the street offered to cut his hair, and he accepted that. But then he grew up with her husband. He looked like a different man. But he still wanted to get high on his own, didn't want to take prescription medication. Finally, he left us and came back and went to live in another home. He asked for a priesthood blessing. Now, as his home teacher, we called it at the time, now we would call it a ministering brother, I went over with a friend of mine. We went to give him a blessing. We were in this small little room in this lady's house. Well, let's put it this way. It was an extraordinary experience. During the blessing, we were in a closed room. I opened my eyes, and there were two people there that were my companion and I. They were two women, very distinctively colored in hair, and even skin was a little different. They're red-haired. I didn't know who they were. My companion did. He didn't tell me who they were until the following Sunday. But I told this man that he had had two family members come and see him during this blessing, and that they were basically holding each other and weeping. They were. I told him, I said, I've never had this experience. You must be so special. You really need to do what you can to get off these drugs and live the kind of life you were raised to live. Well, that didn't work. But on Sunday, my friend took me to a bulletin board in our building, which had all of the Relief Society presidents since our ward had been founded. And it was an older ward here in Mesa. I'm not sure how they got all those pictures, but it was magnificent. But he showed me those two sisters, and I recognized them. And it turned out that it was his mother and his sister, and both had passed. But this gentleman would leave to go get drugs and get high, and then he would, and we're talking somebody in my age. This is how firm the addiction was. At one point, he got injured very badly. They put him in a nursing home that the state ran. It was in a scary place in Phoenix. It was a scary location. I went during daylight hours. I wouldn't have gone at night. I tried to get some information from him about his military service, hoping to get him into a Veterans Administration nursing home so he could heal in a more safe environment. I come to find out, after he'd given me power of attorney and things like that, he didn't qualify for any VA benefits because he had done this robbery so quickly that he hadn't even spent 181 days in the military. It wasn't long after he got out of that location, where he's now a cripple, that he got high again, overdosed, and this time they couldn't bring him back, and he died. Of all of his children, and he had several, his ex-wives, he had several, and they were all in the area. The only person that came to his funeral besides myself was one of his daughters. She was also a drug addict. So it's pretty sad. It's the smallest funeral I've ever been to. And I'm sad for him that he made those choices. I know drugs are terrible. I know how addicting they are. When I was 17, I broke my leg, and I was addicted to morphine because they hadn't kept track of how long they could give it to me. And so by the time I really needed the morphine in my healing process, I couldn't have any anymore. They took me off it I think I had to go cold turkey for a week. It was terrible. But I'm glad I didn't get addicted, and I'm glad I have fought to not have an addictive personality. I told you in the past about my grandfather that lived in a bottle. I didn't want to be like that. But my concern, my worry for everyone is that we do what we can to help those that are struggling, and that we show love to those that do have problems. We all have our own weaknesses, and none of us is perfect. The difference that I see in this guy when he had a haircut and when he didn't, totally different world. I'm grateful that I was able to see that. I'm grateful he accepted a haircut from this lady down the street. I should have asked him in a different way, I guess, to go get a haircut with me. I didn't do it right. But I'm glad he did get a haircut because he felt better about himself. Now, please hear this story as it's intended. It was a sacred experience, one that I'm grateful that I was able to learn about and to share. To have that experience with this dear friend who was my companion, that made us close because he'd never had that kind of experience before. And it was unique. I rarely meet people that are so loved that angels literally come and attend them. This man, while he had his problems, he was loved. Came from a great family. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I hope you'll join me again. You'll like and subscribe. Give me your comments. Tell me what you think, what you'd like to hear more about. Please tell your family and friends. May you have a great day. Bye now.